everyone. I am Myesha-Tiara. I'm the artistic director at Perceptions Theater, and I am here today with Marie Yuen, who is the playwright for First Comes Love and our fourth annual BIPOC Play Festival. Thank you
Mm.
so much for being here. So I know a little bit about you just because I know we had like an introductory question thing, and you wrote down some answers and such. So you're from Chicago, correct?
Yes, born and bred here in Chicago.
Okay, first off, why did you decide to submit your play to Perceptions?
Well, I'm always kind of on a hunt for places to submit my pieces to. But one thing that impressed me about Perceptions was that it was on the South Side, and that the voices were well, not white. I mean, it was basically BIPOC. I mean, for people of color, it seems like sometimes there aren't that many places that are accepting plays that have our voice. And so when I found out that Perceptions was open to receiving submissions to me, I was like, okay, great, maybe there's something will happen from this. And it did. So that was nice to know.
I will say I am ecstatic that you submitted to us because to be honest, I am also a director. So when I go see shows, if I like an actor or whatever, I wait until the show is over or whatever. And so I can go up to them and get their information. And I say that to say a lot of times when I am always on the hunt for actors of color. So when I see Asian actors and I'm just like on all aspects, because I mean, like Asian is very broad, but
Mm.
all areas of it. And I was just like, and I see someone who's good, I'm like, come here, I need your information. Because to me, from my perspective of being a director and looking for shows, even from playwrights, I unfortunately, and please let me know where I should be looking. It's hard for me to find oftentimes a lot of Asian actors, no matter which side of Asia they are even from, or their ethnicity, all that stuff, and even playwrights as well. So I wanted to ask you, do you feel like it's hard? Because I know you said that earlier that it's oftentimes you don't see places that are actually really wanting to hire all of the BIPOC and really be invested in telling all these different stories. So for you as a playwright, is it hard for you to get your work produced, or is it hard for you to find actors? How is it from your perspective?
In terms of Asian American actors, there is no trouble finding the community here in Chicago. Um, if if you the only thing is sometimes it's hard to find places that have them. I mean, like there are theaters that will maybe employ one or two if you're really fortunate in a piece. Um, there's been this phenomenon of Asian American theater starting up in Chicago, but they don't last. Part of that is getting the word out, but the other part of it is that Asians have not, as a general rule, for those who don't participate in theater or go regularly to theater, haven't really come to support Asian American theaters. So it's been kind of disappointing and discouraging for those who try starting up because they'll start it up and they'll go for a while and then they'll lose momentum because it doesn't seem like the community is supporting them. So there's been like at least 10 different theaters that have come up through the years and have kind of fallen away, unfortunately, for one reason or another. And it's been hard. It's always hard when a theater starts up and it's populated by people who are actors because having the business side of things isn't something that actually naturally come into contact with. And it's hard because I mean a lot of times people who are actors who happen to be Asian Americans are kind of like, okay, well, I need to do this for myself. But for doing this for a community, for theater, that's a different kind of animal. And it's hard. Um, one Asian American theater that's going up right now is Token Theater. And they have a production that's currently in on the boards called Zac Efron, gay Asian American rom-com. And so So that's what's happening right now. So people are supporting that. It's been hard because for myself, my emphasis has been on musicals. So there's even less companies that want to tackle that. Just because musicals are by and large more expensive to produce than straight plays. Some of my writing has been about the Asian or Asian American experience. There are other times I want to tackle subjects that are universal that are not necessarily Asian in scope. And right now, my most completed musical doesn't have any Asian storyline to it at all. And sometimes I wonder if the places I've been submitting to are like, okay, what is this? And why is she connected to it if it's not Asian or that we can see? And I'm like, do we necessarily have to be Asian to have an Asian storyline? Do we can't we have a storyline that's not Asian at all that we can be part of? That just because the fact that it's cast with Asians is kind of subversive in its own right. I kind of fall into a where do we put her box? Because yeah, I do know about the stereotypical tropes, and I suppose I could write into that if I wanted to, but I'm not interested in that. For one thing, I never took martial arts. I mean, I took ballroom dance when I was in college. And for people who are dancers, if they really want, they can use that as a language for learning martial arts. But I'm like, well, if that's not part of my toolbox, then how can I really write about that? As I try to find subject matter to write about, it comes from a lot of me reading, tapping into what I feel is the current zeitgeist and trying to figure out, okay, of that, what's catching my attention? What is it that I want to explore? I guess it's true what they say. Drama, dying is easy, comedy is hard. And so writing drama, there's a lot of pieces that people are writing in the Asian American theater community that happens to be drama. Fewer that happen to be comedy. What I'm kind of afraid of sometimes when I write is if I write drama, if I'm not careful, it seeps into melodrama. And then after that, I'm like, okay, I don't really want to do that. There was this one clip that I found recently on YouTube, which happened to be filmed in 1989, and it was a short piece that was from a longer episode of Designing Women, where the Sugarbaker sisters were on an airplane, and in the middle was this one guy who happened to be Asian. The Sugarbaker sister was like, "Oh, he's sitting on my strap," and I don't like that. And the other sister was like, don't talk about him like that. You should say, sorry." And then she was like, "Okay, this is what you should say." And so, she tried to say in Japanese. I don't know how accurate it was actually, but since they were flying to Japan, that was what they're assuming. So then the guy wakes up and he happens to be this Asian comedian who was born in Knoxville, Tennessee, named Henry Cho. And so he starts speaking. And so you immediately assume that since it's back in 1989, he was going to speak either with an accent or just speak with an American diction. But no, he comes out and you suddenly realize he's a Southern Asian and he's speaking with the drawl. And it just, I mean, he didn't have a lot of lines, but the fact that it was so unexpected sent the audience into like a gale of laughter because of like they were not expecting that whatsoever. And it was like, yeah, this is an American. And he's not just an American, he's a good old boy. And so, I mean, it it definitely got people unawares. And they posted that because I'm like, okay, this is what happened back in 1989. Let's get past the trying to, talk stuff. And in the last 5 to 10 years, there's been less talking with accents, which has been good, except for people who were born overseas. And of course, they're speaking English and maybe they have a little bit of an accent, but that's to be expected. There are people of French background who happen to be Asian. Yo-Yo Ma, for example, he was born in Paris. And people know about him. There are things happening in film and TV. There are things happening in theater, but it's happening on the coast more often than not, in New York, LA. There used to be in San Francisco, not as much right now, I think. A couple months ago, I went to St. Paul, Minneapolis to see this Asian American musical, Blended Harmony, the Kim Lu sisters. And that was of a family of four sisters who were half Chinese, half Polish, who were from Minneapolis, Minnesota, who made it to Broadway in the 1930s, 1940s, and made it into a couple of Hollywood films in the 1940s. And it was about their lives. And I was like, okay, we need more of these. We need more homegrown type things that tackle stories about what it's like being from here. We're getting stories that have to do with being from overseas. And those are okay, those are fine. But if, for example, we have people who are moved from my parents or grandparents were born overseas and came here stories. Uh, I I know of a family whose ancestors came over 4, 5, even 7 generations ago, who happened to be Asian American. And we're not really having that many stories about that. We're having stories about their ancestors, but not necessarily about their descendants. Those stories have yet to be explored.
I would definitely say that a lot of what you're saying, I'm seeing a lot of similarities when it comes to Black playwrights when they're talking about, okay, the stereotypes of stuff, and not having the opportunity, and not and being 7 generations removed or 5 generations removed, but you're still talking about slavery plays or stuff that's way more traumatic, whereas we're in 2024 and let's get a play about nothing and we're all just happen to be Black, or a play about nothing and we all just happen to be Chinese. And I really love that you have that thought process. And I hope there are more playwrights who are say, okay, I can write those stories. And I feel like for you, first comes love. You're able to write without making it specific to a certain culture or where it has to be. Because I remember we asked, you were like, hey, we're casting your show, right? How would you like it to be cast? And you were like very open. So I would love to know from you, what makes you decide what your character breakdown will end up being like for your plays and musicals?
It always depends on the subject matter, on what topic's catching my attention at the time. When I was writing First Come Love, I wasn't really necessarily thinking about it. I mean, I didn't specifically, if I specifically wanted Asian, I would have added Asian elements to it. But I was like, at the time I was writing, like, well, this could happen to anyone. And my focus on it was trying to figure out, okay, what is it like if you have to be someone who is expecting? I mean, at the time I was like, well, okay. I had friends who were having children. I was like, okay, I have no idea what that's like. What is that like? And then I was like, okay, if I had a child, um, what would happen if there were complications involved? What would happen if it turned out to be a special needs child? Would I freak? What would I do? What would it be like? I couldn't fathom what that was about. And so I asked a friend of mine, Angela Pullen, who was working at March of Dimes, who um, was her job was being a physical therapist for children with special needs, and about what some of the things parents would have to deal with and consider when with a child who has special needs, because I had no clue. I had no idea. And so I was asking her because, okay, I need to make this more authentic. And so I tapped into her experience and what she knew in order for me to like, okay, so it wouldn't feel like I was just reaching for something that I had no idea about, because I didn't. I think way back when, before I even thought about writing First Comes Love, there was this one time when I was with a friend after church, and I was telling her, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to the bathroom all the time. And right away she said, "Are you pregnant?" I was like, "No, why? Is this what pregnancy is about? You have to go to the bathroom a lot?" And she was like, "Well, it's part of it." And I'm like, oh, okay. And so I stored that for a while. And that was kind of, I guess, the germ of how that all came about, because I had no clue. And I was like, well, I guess maybe that's what I'm supposed to expect when that happens. And so, yeah, so that was one of the things that I started out with when I decided to write First in Love. Just all these things I didn't know about. I was like, well, okay, well, I kind of like to know about it. I don't know what it's like. What would it be like for me if I was in that situation? And so when I wrote for Iris and I wrote for Delia, each time I was trying to put myself into their perspective. And it's like, okay, and that's kind of how it kind of rolled into place.
Oh, I love that. I love that you actually are researching and getting real time people their experiences and incorporating it into the work that you do, and you're not making assumptions. Because there are times that I think that some playwrights will just write something and they'll be like, well, I just assume that's the way it is. And they don't do their own due diligence of doing research, which I think puts your work above some others when it's like it comes off more authentic and realistic versus just being like, oh, I think this is a stereotype of what is happening. So I appreciate that you write from a real and an honest place and you put the people and their experiences into your work. I would love to know for you, who are some of your biggest influences?
Lerner and Lowe is always a good one. Um, they there was this one time I looked at the original version of Camelot, and it's different from the book version of the recent revival, and just how things changed. Because there was this one scene where Morgan Le Fay goes into rapturous ecstatics about chocolate. That's no longer in the piece, I think. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. When Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote Flower Drum Song, I kind of did a compare and contrast the movie version with the theatrical version, with the book, because I read the book, paired those with the revisal that David Henry Hwang did back in 2002. Found that each time a different iteration, a different adaptation happened, there was something that was changed, and at the same time, something that was lost along the way. The most Asian of those was, of course, the book that everything was based off of, that was written by C.Y. Lee. About 10, 15 years ago, there was talk about a version of it happening here in Chicago, which unfortunately didn't happen. And I think part of the difficulty is for Asian Americans here in Chicago who happen to know how to do musicals, who are versed in that, who can sing and dance. Um, it's it's not lucrative for people who are triple threats to be non-union, because since so few are non-union that are musicals that are Asian American, that are not either Miss Saigon or The King and I, it people just can't make a living wage at that. So very quickly they become union, they become equity. And so what happens is most theaters can't afford them. And so they can do the national tours, they can do the regional things. Um, but there are a few pieces that would naturally go to them in terms of casting. One of the reasons why I wanted to write musicals was because I wanted to do something about increasing the canon. To be able to have Asian Americans who could naturally be cast in shows. Um, not just as ensemble, not just as supporting, but as the leads. And so I've been trying to do that, but it's been hard because since I don't compose, finding composers that I can work with who understand my vision has been hard, because of the Asian American posters that I know of. More of them have to be either in New York or in LA. And of the pieces that they're attracted to, it's something that are usually earlier in the process or something that they want to kind of have themselves. And so it's been hard. And so that's one of the reasons why I have few that are up and running and being shopped around. My most completed musical happens to be the one that's not Asian at all. And I've been like, okay, I've been shopping around to so many different theaters. And I guess they're thinking like, well, this is nothing new. And I'm like, it would be if it was cast with all Asians.
What is it? What is it about? Because I know that you like have talked about like, musicals are really your thing. And
Yeah.
as you've been talking, my wheels have been turning, and you were telling me that
Uh-huh.
you did dance and you did like ballroom dancing. And I'm sitting over here like, and you didn't write a musical about uh Chinese American woman who is a ballroom dancer.
It's called Roxanne of Bergerac. It's the story of Cyrano, but told from Roxanne's more postmodern, semi-postmodern point of view. I took her because she was a supporting character, made her the lead, made Cyrano supporting, and I beefed up the role of duenna. So there's a role for an Asian, well, right now I'm seeing a role for an Asian American woman who happens to be in her 60s, um, which I am told is a really great part. I had a reading of it back in November in New York that I cast with all Asians and got some feedback, and that was good. And so it's hard because right now I think I'm the only one that has a vision of it being cast with all Asians. Um, I tried submitting it to a place here in Chicago, didn't hear of anything, so I think I've been passed over again. And I'm like, well, I guess because like at that time I was like, well, if it gets picked up, it won't be cast with all Asians. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm not sure what this will mean for the people that showed up for my reading. But I was like, well, if they'll get it across to potential producers, directors, investors, maybe they might come on board. Who knows? But since it has been passed over, I'm like, well, I can go back to my original vision now, and just try and figure out, okay, how am I going to get this produced because I don't have the money for it. Um, if I had the money for it, yeah, I could pull out the stops. I could hire whoever I wanted. That would be great. It would be seeing people for the first time in something that's French, that's universal, and that was one of the reasons why I picked on it because of universal. And seeing people in a way that would definitely expand the range, and throw in my own version of comedy, which I think would translate well overseas, because I happen to live and work for a time as well overseas. And when I was there, I got involved with community theater and found the types of musicals that they liked. If I could afford to produce it, I would. And I could hire all the people that I would love to work with. Like, for example, Anne Harada, Ruthie Ann Miles, Ali Ewald, maybe John Briones. People like that. People that I can't afford at all because, let's face it, they haven't heard of me, but I've heard of them. When I first started writing this, it was because I wanted to combine something that was from 1640, 1650 France with the language of today, the most American music being jazz, the most American type of theater piece being musicals. And at the same time, just at the time when I first started writing, I was thinking, well, okay, maybe one or two Asians might be cast in it eventually. But I'm like, now, okay, I want them all to be Asian American.
And you
And
know what? I think
yeah,
that that's something that I'm noticing from a lot of playwrights are starting to do, which I think is very smart, is to put in their cast breakdowns what race, ethnicity they want people to be, and then putting like a little italicized thing that says they have to be this. If you do not make them this is not how the play will work well at all. And I feel like that's kind of like starting your play off and being like a this is what it is, because I think a lot of the things that you're saying, especially with your own work and all of your ideas you have, I really think that a lot of these newer companies that are coming up in Chicago that are a lot younger, and the ones that are like more experimental, and the ones who are just like, I want some stuff, I want something new, something different. I really feel like they can find a place and a home with your work. Like a lot of the stuff that you're saying, I'm talking to these different actors and these directors out there that are looking for things that you're describing, and they are, you know, the newer generation, like they are just like, I'm hungry, I want to do something different. And I really think that your work can help be a part of that for sure. And of course, like if you had $1 million, I mean, you can make anybody, you know, you can have this stuff right now on Broadway.
Right.
But
Well,
I
unfortunately
would
for
love to know,
Broadway, it's
how
not.
can we make sure that we support as much as we can? Because I know that you say within the community itself that they don't often, you know, aren't as supportive. But what can we do to be as supportive as possible for not only for you but for other Asian playwrights, Asian actors, directors? What can we do to make sure that we are highlighting you, also contributing to you as much as we can financially, and making sure we support your work? Because I know what else at Perceptions, that's a big part of our whole mission, is we want to highlight these works. We want these people to be seen. We want these people to have a job. So what
Yeah.
can we do as an overall community in Chicago that we can do to make sure that we're not having so many companies shut down? You know, mind you, we're, you know, the lay of the land with theater, it's like it's up, it's down, you know, but what can we do?
Well, it's part of I think is that what you're doing so far already, and just being open to hearing our voices, getting the word out, offering us contracts, that helps. And spreading the word. Talking with people that you meet, that we exist, that we're here, that we have something to contribute, that we have stories that haven't been told, and not just trying to find stories that'll fit what you think will fill the seats, because um it's hard, because if you're only looking for stuff that'll fill the seats, you're going for your current and your past patrons. You're not going for patrons you haven't met yet. And part of that is increasing awareness. Part of that is educating people who are not used to going to see theater. Yeah. Um, Part of that is just planting those seeds, I guess. Sometimes it's hard trying to convince people one at a time, and it's exhausting one at a time. Making it exponential helps. Um, Trying to show up the community helps, and as much as I can, I try in my own way to show up for the community. I think for my own community, I think they don't exactly understand what I'm trying to do. But I sometimes I feel like I'm an Asian American pop cultural historian, because part of what I've been doing is searching in the archives for pieces that have been done in the past, saying my say about what I thought about what was happening of that time, and at least, and saying, okay, at least they were there. They came before us. We don't need to recreate what happened then, because that's taking up too much space of what could be done instead nowadays. We don't need to repeat the past in that sense of telling those stories. We need to be telling stories that haven't been told yet, that haven't been told before, and getting that out to the mainstream. Because if we're just telling among ourselves, we're preaching to our own little choir. And at the same time, if the only audiences that are showing up are people that are not of our demographic, that's not helping those of us that are yearning to see our stories And for the people that have recently come over that don't realize all the stories that have come before because they're thinking, oh, I'm the only one here. Where am I? How do I fit in? Because we don't necessarily need to conform anymore. I mean, come on. Getting back to Roxana Bergerac, the reason why I haven't put in the casting that it has to be Asian American is because if I did that, people would be like, okay, there are very few companies that'd be willing to offer a contract. I always felt that, okay, yeah, let the first, right now I'm feeling like, okay, let the first productions be all Asian American, but let eventually be different productions where they can be Latin, they can be African American, they can be Native American, they can be a mix of all of these. And because when I wrote this, I wrote it in a way that it could be high school and college friendly, church friendly, community theater friendly, overseas friendly, so that it could basically be positioned in a way that a lot of people could go and see it, where because um there are a lot of pieces that are being written, yeah, in the Asian American community. A lot of those are for adults. And I don't see a lot of families going out to see them, and I don't see them bringing their children with them because it's subject matter that is sensitive, that can't play to those audiences. And not that there's wrong with those pieces existing. I have no problems with that. For me, the audience I'm trying to go for happens to be different. And maybe that's another reason why it hasn't been seen.
But you know what? I think that you telling us this and helping us understand also how to be better allies, also how to really be supportive of work. I think this is helping with turning over, I wanted to say a new leaf, but for those newer companies, those people who are out here starting, these people who really want what you have to offer, they're like, oh my gosh, Marie's got it. That's where I need to go. That's what I need to associate myself with. And we're definitely at Perceptions are going to make sure we stay in contact with you because we love your work. And we're so happy that you were gracious enough to submit to us. This is our 5th year in business, and we thank you for sharing what you've created and allowing us to be able to put our productional spin on it. But I want to make sure that we show everything we do with your work with as much respect as possible. And I thank you for dropping so many good gems in this interview of letting us know what to do. Also, where we stand right now with, honestly, what you're saying is a lot of equitability issues with being able to showcase so many different cultures and and being aware and not just doing something to be presentational or to get a lot of butts and seats, like you're saying, with getting that new audience member versus just going with what can get you a whole bunch of money real quick. So I thank you for sharing all of that with us. I want to ask you one last thing. What is one hobby that you have that helps you to relax when you're not writing, when you're not taking on any of those things? What is something that you thoroughly enjoy doing?
Oh, well, something I've mentioned before, I like to dance. That's my one vice. I like to basically make stuff up. So I just like putting on the music, and I just when I my sister and I, what we used to have is we made up a game when we were kids called Can You Dance That? And what we used to do is we used to throw on the radio to whatever station was playing and like, okay, dance to that. And then we would try, and then we would switch stations right away. Dance to that, dance to that, dance to that. And so it's being able to improvise on the spot with whatever's happening. And so yeah, I mean when I do when I do like to veg out, I like to listen to music, and I like to listen to different types of music, and I like to dance to that.
Awesome. I love it. Look, I love a good dance party. So thank you, Marie Yuen, for being here with us, for sharing your thoughts on how you started with First Comes Love, sharing your thoughts on your musical writing career, which I hope that, we haven't produced a musical yet.
Mhm.
However, I'm not against you sliding any of your musicals this away so we can read them. So thank you so much. I can't wait for everyone to see what you have to say and just for our audience to be able to see your work and see you talking about your work. So once again, thank you so much for joining us for this interview and have a great day.
Thank you so much. And you too.